Good afternoon, Stampers. Today I'm going to be making a card that we made this month in our May club class. And I'm going to be using a new die that came out in the Occasions mini catalog called Fun Flowers. It has 5 pieces. You can see here on the die, it's a large die, so you have to have the extended cutting pads to use with your Big Shot. I cased this card from one of the girls I met at Michelle Rahall's retreat at Epworth by the Sea here in Georgia back a month ago. The first thing you're going to need to do is, of course, you're going to have the die. The die set you can buy is still available even though it was in the Occasions mini catalog. You'll see on your screen the item number. It has 5 pieces. I took a piece of Baja Breeze paper and stamped it with the En Francais large background stamp, and then ran the piece of paper through the die machine, so you can see it has my stamping on there. So what I'm going to do is remove these from the die and go ahead and take my sponge and some Baja Breeze ink and sponge around the edges. So once you go do that, come back and we'll start up from there. You could use your sponge dauber for this, but I like using the circular craft sponges. I just cut them in wedges. And once you get all of your edges nice and sponged with the Baja Breeze ink, we're going to go ahead and layer the flower. Now the flower has a certain way that it goes. If you wanted it offset, you could do it that way, but I wanted mine to all be just one petal on top of the other. So I've just lined them up just like this. And then the little pieces, the circle, the little squiggly piece goes on top of the circle. Now what I'm going to do is, because I'm going to use a Glimmer Brad, the Glimmer Brad's in Soft Subtles, and I'm just going to use one of the Marina Mist because it is the closest match. These are some Glimmer Brads that were also in the Occasions Mini, but you can still order them. And I'm going to go ahead and make a 1/16 inch hole through these 2 pieces, the little squiggly line and the circle, so that I can put my brad in there, just in the center. And go ahead and stick your brad through that. And you can go ahead and place this on this little piece combination on a dimensional, because it's going to kind of stick up a little bit above the rest of it. Okay, just like so. Now I'm going to glue all these together with just some 2-way glue, or you can use glue dots, or you can actually put some snail in there or some tape. But I'm going to go ahead and layer these up and glue those together and put this on top with a dimensional. Once you get the glue on there and get those pieces assembled, just go ahead and pop your little center section on top there with a dimensional, and go ahead and then take your petals and kind of curl them a little bit with your thumbnail so that they kind of curl up a little bit, not just flat and dreary. We want them to be perky, so just squish them up just a little bit with your thumbnail, not too much. And then we're going to take this and we're going to spray it with Shimmer Mist Smoosh Spray, the vanilla color, which is just sort of a clear iridescent. So I'm going to spray that, and I'll be right back. You see I've got it all nice and sprayed. It's real shimmery and shiny, and I'm just going to let that dry for just a little bit before we go sticking it anywhere on our card. And now we want to stamp our 2 pieces of front matting with the En Francais stamp, and this is the large stamp. So to me it's always easier to ink the stamp and lay the paper on it than it is to try to press this stamp down onto something, especially if you're not using a real hard surface like I'm not using one today. So I'm going to have my 2 pieces. One's crumb cake and one is not quite navy, and those pieces are cut at 5 by 3 3/4, and the crumb cake piece is 4 7/8 by 3 5/8. So I'm just going to ink up my stamp first with crumb cake ink. Do the lighter first because I'm just going to wipe the pad off. I'm not going to really clean it real good. So I'm just going to do a little color right there in the middle. I'm going to lay my cardstock down on it and just rub my fingers around the corners. Make sure it's all covered. If you don't want to get any ink on your fingers, you can lay a piece of paper over it to make sure that you don't get any on you. And there, that's nice and even. And then I'm just going to wipe it just very slightly with my damp rag instead of going to the trouble to clean the stamp. If you want to go ahead and clean it, you can. And then I'm going to use Not Quite Navy ink. I'm going to ink it up the same way. Just rub the pad over there. Don't rub your pads too hard on these kind of stamps because you'll actually fray the edges of your stamp pad. So do it very gently. You're not trying to scrub it on there. So try to not deteriorate your stamp pads. And this is the Not Quite Navy. And if you know from experience, Not Quite Navy, if it gets on something, it is not coming out. So I'm going to use a piece of paper to protect my fingernails because they'll be blue for the next week. And that up. Perfect. Okay, and set that aside for cleaning. Okay, now we have our two pieces of matting for the front. Now these need to be distressed on the edges. If you have the Stampin' Up! Tool for distressing that comes in the cutter kit, that is the easiest thing to use. If you don't have that, you can use a steak knife that has a serrated edge, and that's what I'm going to be using today because I have loaned my distressing tool to someone and I haven't gotten it back yet. So I'm just going to use my knife. And of course this is much easier with the little distressing tool, but you know, you don't always have every tool that you need when you need it. Okay, once you get all the edges distressed, then we're going to take our sponge again, and we're going to use some Not Quite Navy and some craft, and we're going to sponge around the edges. Okay, when you get all those sponged, then you can go ahead and we can mount these two pieces together, and we want to put adhesive everywhere except up in this upper right hand corner because we want to leave it so that we can roll it down. So don't get any adhesive up to right about here. Okay? Okay, and then we're just going to have those two pieces mounted together. I'm not going to do my little curling yet until I get it attached to the front of my card. Okay, now we're ready to mount our flower to the front. Make sure it's all curled up the way we want it. A couple of little pieces ought to do me there. Just go ahead and stick that right on the front. Now we're going to go ahead and tie our ribbon around it here, and we're going to be using the Baja Breeze seam binding with just a little piece of the crumb cake tied into just the knot, unless you want to wrap it around the whole piece, which you can do if you'd rather do that. So I'm just going to cut me off just a small little piece of the crumb cake to go in the knot. And I'm going to use my blue, and once again, of course, I'm going to be tying it around my little measuring tool, which is my tube, and I'm just going to be tying it in a knot. Okay, we're just going to tie this around our tube, and I'm going to go ahead and put my piece of crumb cake right there so that it gets right underneath like this, so that it will get incorporated into the knot. Just tie. Simple knot, and you can go ahead and trim the edges. I know the crumb cake is kind of ravelly. A lot of people don't like it in class because they say it's too ravelly. You can, if you want to make sure it doesn't ravel, you can dip your ends into some Crystal Effects or just put just a little bit of Tombow on there, and I guarantee you it won't ravel then. Okay, so I've got my little knot just the way I want it, and it's going to wrap around the card right about there. So I'm just going to snip on the back, and then I'm going to wrap this around my card and glue it down on the back. And now we're ready to mount this to the front of our card. We have a piece of crumb cake and it's just in a portrait fold. So this will go right on the front. And I'm just, once again, just going to use a little bit of snail. And of course my idea of a little bit is probably more than your idea of a little bit. I'm just not going to put any in the upper right hand corner because that's where I want my little roll down piece to go, to be done. So I'm going to stay away from the right corner. A little there. And go ahead and mount this to the front of the card. Okay. Now I'm going to take my bone folder and I'm going to pick up that corner because I haven't glued it down. Pick up the blue corner, and if you want to use your aqua painter to kind of wet that little corner, you can. It doesn't really have to be wet to do this, but just kind of twirl it just a little bit with your bone folder, and then just using your fingernails, you're just going to roll it. And it's going to stay curled up because it's Stampin' Up! Cardstock, so it's nice and thick. And you're just going to curl that corner over. Just like that. Okay. I used the Oval All stamp set for my sentiment, and I stamped Fabulous Friend. And I'm just going to mount that onto the decorative label punch, which I've already punched out with a decorative label punch out of Not Quite Navy. And then I'm just going to mount that right here on the front of the card with a couple of dimensionals just over my ribbon. Hope you enjoy. Happy stamping!
Someday we'll find it, the rainbow connection, the lovers, the dreamers, and me.